Is it implied that Steele getting benched in this team means people snaked him?
It could be implied.
What would your take on whatever you can say about this? Like, because obviously the other thing was, it's not like they just kicked you. Like, you were the IGL, then they benched you, then you were there for a while, then eventually you left and did the other team. Like, what went on here?
Yeah.
Give us your take.
So the first thing that happened was when we still had Dicey on the team, I and the team were thinking, the team being me, Hiko, Nitro. Asuna wasn't part of this decision. We were thinking like, well, the game's going in a direction where, we don't know how long Jet 1 tricks are going to be viable. It could be a long time, it could be a short time. We have no idea. We need to have players that are able to, if Jet gets nerfed, if agent bans happen tomorrow, what's going to happen? Can this player play different roles? So we first started trying like on a certain map, we tried Dicey as Sage, and it was very underwhelming. So we were concerned, like, okay, how important is it to have like a Jet 1 trick opper compared to having like more well-rounded people, and people just pick up the op when necessary, and we'll use Jet when necessary, and we can choose different comps and stuff like that. So we kind of did him dirty, where we and the GM talked, and I think Frost might have known as well, that we're like, yeah, we think Dicey's got to go. And after we did that, I know that Asuna was very like sad about it. One, because like he lost another young person from the team, but two, how we did it. So we discussed, me, Nitro, and Hiko discussed what we did to Dicey was wrong. We didn't really give him a warning. We didn't give him a heads up. We didn't like. We kind of gave him chances, but we didn't like tell him like, hey, like you really need to be developing as other agents. Otherwise, like, we got to make a change. Like, we didn't give him a warning. There was nothing. We didn't include Austin in the conversation. So we said, this is fucked what we did. We cannot do this again. We need to make sure that if we're having a problem with a player, we need to have a conversation out in the open. Everyone can hear about it, or we talk to the people about it, and we discuss it openly. Like, hey, we're having a problem with you because of X, Y reasons, and you need to take these steps to rectify it. We had this conversation like literally right after telling Asuna and cutting Dicey, because it was just like it was scummy what we did. So we're looking for different fifths, and I know that Nitro is trying to get like a Liege on the team, and eventually, like a month later, he's telling me that he wants a Liege to cut Hiko and pick up a Liege because Hiko's never going to change as a player, blah blah blah. And I said, look, dude, we already had this conversation that we're, if we have problems with players, we put it on the table in front of everyone. I'm having this conversation right now. So I know, we ended up getting Ethan, and I thought everything was going to be on the table, but after we were playing with Ethan, like our GM would make a group, like a text group with all of us, the coach, all the players, and the GM would be in this WhatsApp group where we can all communicate. And then a minute later, we have this exact same group minus the GM. And so I didn't realize until after I was off the team that there's probably another one of those groups.
They had one without everyone,
yeah, sure, except for
like the old
Austin
group chat. Exactly, yes,
exactly. Yes. So that's my take on like what eventually happened. But to get there, what happened was now we have another person from CS that has their own opinion, that was on their own team for a long time, that had their own degree of success, and now it's whose ship is this? Who's running the show? They already asked me to be IGL, and it was now that there were so many people talking about like, what are we gonna do? Who's got control? Whose vision is it? Who's gonna like run the show? That we needed to pick. And again, it was reaffirmed. It's Steele's the IGL, and it's Steele's show. Let him kind of like take the reins of this. And Hiko was behind that, and the coach Frost was actually like, despite what everyone thinks, because everyone's like, oh, well, Steele and Frost, Steele and his coach were fighting all the time, and that's why the team imploded. It's like everyone argued. The coach had arguments with the other players as well. We argued a lot. We didn't agree on a lot of things. We didn't agree with like how we did things. But when it came to like, okay, we said it's Steele's we gave Steele the keys to this, and we need to respect like what he says with this stuff. He was like the loudest person saying like, guys, we got to fucking let him make this call for us, because we can't go into a game where two people are following this person's thing, two people are following what I'm saying, and the third person's like, well, I don't know what the fuck to do now. And Austin was like that odd man out where he's just like, he just wanted everyone to be happy. Hiko was trying to like back me because he's like, well, like we already said this, so like we got to give him it. And then it was like Nitro and Ethan had their own problems, whereas just like 1 week they wanted like, yo, why are we calling this like our A default? Like let's call it our let's call it like the 221 default. And then like a week later, it's like, why are we calling it 221? That's stupid. I want to call it the A default. It's like, bro, like fuck it, not worth it. So like there's a lot of this where we'd go from like we'd be playing like Ascent, and we'd have a default in Ascent where we would have like 2 people A main, 1 person mid, and 2 people B main. And there was like, well, can we call it our something default? And it's like, okay, sure. And then the next week is like, can we call it the 212? It's like, sure. And it's flip-floppy. But we said, okay, the reason why this doesn't work for us as like our main default is that if something happens on B, we are not in a position, we're so spread apart that we can't fast react anywhere. So what we should do is we should start working heavy towards one extremity plus middle and light on the other extremity, and that should be our main default, whether we focus more on A or focus more on B. So I'm like, okay, we all agreed on this. We all said this is smart, this makes sense. And then like we're at a boot camp. We happen to qualify for the Masters 3 Berlin, and we're at a boot camp in the complexity facility, and we revisit this where we start talking about some obscene shit where we're completely redoing everything. And it wasn't just like this example like on Ascent, it was like every map. It was so inconsistent that we would just flip-flop every day, every week, where we'd do something, we'd say we don't like it, we'd switch to something else, it doesn't work, we don't like it, we want to go back. They're just going back and forth constantly. I'm like, guys, we have to just fucking pick something, and it needs to be logical, and we need to just like understand why we're doing it this way. And there was so much like inconsistency. We got in such stupid, annoying, petty fights about it, where it was just so hard for people to just buy into one thing that we just knew like this shit was like going in a bad trajectory. I had messaged my GM at the time, and I said, hey, there's like way too much stuff going on the team right now in terms of just like getting on the same page. I feel like I'm an odd man out. At the end of the year, I'd like to consider exploring different options, because this doesn't look like it's going to work out where we can all like coexist.
One thing I would ask though is, how could that be the case though, bearing in mind, like as you say, like at that like Masters Berlin event, you had like a banger run. You were like playing against the team that fucking like the team that became Optic, that everyone knows was like, this was like on paper it makes no sense this team could be shit behind the scenes, right?
Yeah. We had kind of like stopped innovating at that time. That's why like in that article that George Geddes put out where I said like, oh yeah, I was just drawing a blank. It's because we hadn't played like Icebox. We were like changing our comps on like Ascent in the middle of the tournament. Like we couldn't agree on anything. And it was just so fucked that like we just didn't have a lot of things. What we did have was like a lot of experience, and we could like slow down the game in the mid rounds and do well with that type of stuff. So like that's how we had our good run, was basically a lot of just like, it was like FPL style almost. Like we had like a few set things, but not a lot. Like we stopped adding and developing and innovating like weeks before it. Like it was just fucked. It was just like, that was like, this isn't gonna last. I think that conversation I had with my GM though, kind of spread, and that led to them wanting to get rid of me either earlier or just like in general. I don't know. I probably had a feeling that they'd probably want me gone. I just didn't think they'd be stupid enough to do it right before LCQ. And I was pretty explicit in what I said to the GM, was that we should do it after Champs. I thought we had a pretty good, and I said this before we even like, we lost to Optic, Envy. I think they might have, I don't remember what. They were Envy at the time. We had lost them in the semifinals. If we had outplaced them at that event, we would have made champs.
Right.
So this is before we lost to them.
Right.
This is before we knew that we'd have to play LCQ, and this is before LCQ happened. I literally got home. I was in Canada for like a quarantine thing because I couldn't go from Germany to the US directly. That I was getting the vibe like something. People aren't talking. Nobody's active in the group. I know what's happening. I've been here. The signs are on the wall. I know what's going on. And like I had to push people, and people didn't know. I was asking players on the team. I was asking the coach. I was asking the GMs. And then I started realizing, hey, so actually, I first knew from other players from different teams, they're benching you for boy. And I had to start asking, and I was being told like, no, what the fuck? And then I started getting told like, let me get back to you. And that's when I knew that it wasn't everyone. It was small and ended big.
Right.
People found out one at a time, which means it wasn't like everyone came together and said, this is a problem. It was a couple of players, one or two, that said, hey, this is a problem. We need to act on this now. And then it kind of forced the hand of everything in like a domino fashion.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.